finally starting to take your music production and your songwriting seriously? Do you think that you have what it takes to make a living in the music industry? Well, this marketing podcast is here to help music producers and artists to begin building a foundation to grow their music company from the bedroom to the boardroom. And now, here's your host, Brennan Lunan.
What's going on, guys? Brennan Lunan over at EQ Productions. This is episode 10 of the Music Marketing Podcast. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about topics that really make a big deal in your music career. Things like whether or not you should sign to a major label or even look to, whether or not you should get a manager and when is a good time to do so. And do you need a lawyer, and if you should, hire one to review your contracts and, important documents that you sign before you sign them. And I stress before you sign those documents. So today I want to start the episode and talk to you guys from my perspective of being a producer for the past 20 years and always wondering how I could expand my career, or whether or not I should get me a manager or a lawyer, or, whether or not it's right for me, or if I'm ready to, if I'm good enough, just all that doubt and, the negativity that creeps in. And from the point that we start creating music to the point that, we retire from the music industry, if we get into that kind of career path, it's always, a road filled with loathing, questioning, depression, doubt. I mean, you pull a negative emotion out, you pretty much could assign it to any of the millions of musicians or producers or artists that's out there right now. And that's kind of, I guess, what drives us. So we always tend to want to kind of expand and can never be content with where we're at. And I guess that's what makes us artists and creatives. But oftentimes we kind of get into this mode of trying to do anything that we possibly can to trying to get into, a better situation financially and career-wise. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck where you are and you feel stagnant, and that's just no way to kind of motivate yourself. So often you will see a lot of musicians doing everything they could possibly do, working their asses off. I mean, putting everything on the line, making sure that they get everything done first before they eat, before they have fun and party. They want to make sure that they get their jobs done, and that's admirable, and and I respect that. But a lot of times that leads to frustration, leads to exhaustion, and just leads to fatigue, and you can no longer kind of carry on this whole productivity level that you've been, putting out there and what people start to know you for. So it's normal to think that, there's solutions to that problem, like signing, a record deal to a major record label and having them release and do all the marketing and the promotions and everything else. And that's great. And I'm one of those people that believes indie is the way to go, because I work pretty much doing everything myself, from music to art to marketing. I do all my own stuff. And I don't know, maybe I was just lucky that I got to learn, from people that I've been around growing up and coming up in, my career. I mean, I got to learn some of these things kind of firsthand, and I didn't necessarily have to pay people to do things. I do. And I do that just to kind of get things off my plate and outsource and make sure that my job is, not dragging me down. Because honestly, look, folks, I mean, you cannot work 24 hours, 7 days a week. And I get it. Everybody wants to be, the hustle man. Everybody wants to have that as, their brand, where that they hustle 24/7 and all they do is work and no fun for me. All I do is work, man. I get the money. I go after the bag. Blah, 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 all that nonsense. And that's cool, I guess. That's cool to put out there on social media and to kind of brag about and put yourself out there as somebody that's just a nonstop worker. That's awesome. Salute to you for that. But then in reality, I mean, look at what you're trading up. I mean, like, look at you're trading your family and you're trading your, any kind of fun that you could possibly have, because life really isn't about just working. You got to kind of balance it out. And I'm the biggest defender of that, and I violate that rule all the time. I work nonstop. I piss my family off, my wife, and I don't get to see people like I want to and hang out with people because I make the excuses that I'm working. So I get into all that just to kind of talk to you whether or not somebody who's just starting out or who's been in the music industry a couple of years and now is looking to go professional and wants to make that their main source of income. And that, I used to say, fuck record labels and indie's the only way to go. And I realized that, when you're like a super talent, right? When you're somebody that just is just an incredible musician, an incredible performer, incredible songwriter, incredible producer, ultimately you have the blessing and the gift to be able to go and be able to do the one thing that you're amazing at and just continuously do that while somebody else who really believes in what you do goes and starts to market you, promote you, sell your merchandise, run your books, manage your career, and just give you the room to just sit back wherever it is, whether it's behind your instrument or behind the boards, or if you're just stuck behind the computer doing whatever it is that you do. If you have the blessing of the talent, the skill set, and just being one to just crush it, awesome. People like you deserve to have record labels sponsor them, fund them, salute to you. And usually with that kind of skill set comes the leverage of being able to dictate, okay, well, this is what I bring to the table. These are my records. These are my accomplishments. That gives you leverage. Record labels more times than none are going to actually shower you with cash. Maybe not so much these days like they were in the 90s, but still, there's still deals going around. People still getting good deals. So I don't want to sound like I'm anti-record labels because I'm not. What I am anti is I'm anti-laziness from standpoint of people who don't have a music career, right? Who don't have any accomplishments. They're just starting out. And immediately it's this bum rush to the record labels, to the search of record label fame or record label sponsorship, and just, I want to be in the big studios and I want to be, on the big stage. But it's like, bro, you haven't done anything to warrant that. So why, And not to say that, then, you're going to have somebody who's going to do it completely right and somebody doing it completely wrong. I mean, everybody has their gray area. It's really, a gray area is really the biggest, because usually people who do it right do it, and there's so few of them, and there's so many people who do it wrong. You're going to find that sometimes people are still making mistakes and still, being successful, but that's just part of the growth process. So let's talk about whether or not you need to be signed to a record label. Now, this goes out to anybody who is already, touring, being successful. They're recording albums, they're putting them out, they're getting success, and they're seeing some kind of forward motion on their career, and they're making strides. And the next thing, right, is right above that glass ceiling sometimes, right? So sometimes as an indie, you reach a point and you plateau, and you can't necessarily go forward, rather go up, but you just continue to work, and it's just there's nothing that you could do because you just don't have the resources on an indie level, so you don't have the kind of momentum that will propel you through that stratosphere and break that glass ceiling. So, but then looking at your own accomplishments, you could say, hey, man, I really have something to bring to the table, because ultimately that's what it's about. You bring something to the table. No record label is going to develop you. They're not going to, invest in you if you haven't really already delivered results and have proven, whether it's social proof or just, financial or any kind of proof that you could provide to them on paper that they'll be able to corroborate and say, okay, listen, this guy went and took $25,000 of his own money or whatever, and he ended up blah, 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 blah. He made this, he made this shit happen, and everything was great. Now, you compare that to somebody who is just starting out in the industry. They're just brand new. They might know how to play the instrument pretty well, but they haven't recorded. They haven't been on tour. They haven't even played in bands. And, the next thing you know that they're starting a band and they want to go ahead and they want to get signed, or they're a producer and they want their music to be, handed to famous people right off the bat just because he's seeing other people do it. That is not the time to get a major record deal, right? And to sign to a major label, because, alone, if you consider the fact that what most record labels do is just, they're basically managers of your career, but they're doing it in a way that it's not, your interest is not primary. They're doing it to benefit themselves. And that's fine, because every business does it. Every business has their own success, in mind, and their own interest comes first. But as an artist or as a producer on a label, what you're doing is you're being used, and it's fine to be used. The word exploited means to be used, but it's not necessarily always defined as, somebody using somebody and it's unethical or immoral. This is just exploitation, and exploitation is not a bad thing. But as an employee of the record label, which that's what you are, you're basically an employee of the record label. Granted, the pay structure is different. You're being utilized for your skill set, your talents, and your product, which is the recorded material, and also your brand and your looks and so on, right? Your performance style. So they're going to look at you and they're going to say, okay, so, let's look at artist number one. Let's call him John Smith, right? So we're going to look at John Smith and we're going to say, okay, John Smith is an artist. He's been in the game for 5-6 years. He's toured the region. He's played, he's opened up for big names. He's been on big stages. He's got multiple records out. He pushes them on all the social media. He pushes them on, all the streaming. He sells them on iTunes. He sells them on Amazon. So if you start counting off and you start recording the checks down the road, so you start saying, okay, he's got distribution, he's got marketing, he's got promotion, he's got visibility, he's got social following, he's got, legal representation. So it's easier for us to deal with them because, even though most people think that, not having a lawyer, which we'll get to later in the podcast, not having a lawyer might save you money. From a standpoint of the record label dealing with you, you don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea how the business really works. Even though you may have a slight clue, you don't have an idea how the business works like your lawyer would. And an entertainment lawyer's, needle in the haystack. So you really have to find a good one who's not going to screw you, who's not going to, misrepresent you, and who's going to basically commit, who's not going to commit a malpractice in representing you, costing you down the line, income, any kind of revenue streams, screwing up relationships, so on and so forth. So it's super important to have a lawyer. But as a record label executive, to deal with an artist who has no representation, it's almost a turnoff. And it's almost an immediate turnoff because, yes, you don't have representation. Yes, they could screw you. Sure. And that's what a lot of them may do. But a good, honest record label who's, I don't know if there's such a thing, but at least an ethical record label who's not going to necessarily want the bad press and the bad reputation, they're going to kind of push you to getting a lawyer. They're going to want you to get some representation because there's no reason for them to sign an artist, to screw that artist, and then have that artist do what? Continue to work for them and put out great material. I mean, it's just not how things work in the world, and they know this. And so, granted, there's going to be people that's going to try to screw you anyway. They're going to want to take your masters, they want to own your copyrights. But that's not necessarily good business. And a lot of record labels these days already deal with the fallout of, the digital industry, reformatting and changing of the mediums, like going from CDs to MP3s and to streaming and stuff. So there's a lot of fault lines, a lot of earthquakes in the industry where things got shaken up. And so now you coming in as a brand new artist, they don't want to necessarily always just screw you and take your money. They want to, they want to pay you. They want to make sure that other people want to come to them too, because the reputation online now is everything. You could go and check up somebody else's, resumes. You could go check up on somebody else's, history and see reviews. And, there's just decisions you could easily make just by Googling somebody online. And that doesn't necessarily always prevent these companies from screwing you, but oftentimes, and I would say, these days, it really doesn't happen as much as it did in the past. So now it's a little bit more, we're all held to a little bit more higher standard, and everybody's accountable in some shape or form. So as a record label to sign somebody, you're going to look for these things. But as an artist, as a producer, as a singer, songwriter, you're going to start to wonder, like, well, what do I really need a record label for, right? So in examining it, what do you really do need a record label for? So back in the 90s, when CDs and the tapes and, even going before that with vinyl, the biggest thing was distribution, right? So distribution was, how do you get your music out to the masses? How do you get your music from your, whatever it was you were using, whether it was a tape deck at the time or when you got into 4 tracks and, as the technology grew, the medium that you ended up with, whether it's CD or tape or whatever, how do you get that into stores, or how do you get that into the end user's hands, the final, person that's the fan of yours, that's going to spend the money and that's going to want to get the tape, they want to get the CD, the vinyl, whatever. How do you get it in their hands? That was the biggest issue back then. So before the great record industry shakeup, the problem was that as a musician, you didn't have already established distribution channels you could just easily hop into, or just, hop into with a small fee like you can on TuneCore or any of these kind of platforms where you could submit your music for distribution, like CD Baby. That was the biggest thing. So a lot of artists were being kind of hamstrung by the fact that they didn't have these distribution channels, and the record labels did, so they guarded them with their life. That was their lifeblood, right? That was their only way to really hold something and hold leverage over the artists. And so they would basically say, listen, you need us because we would use our existing relationships that we've built with the distributors, like the Walmarts, like the Targets, like the department stores back in the day, before all the online stuff. The Columbia House, which was one of the, if not the biggest CD distributor and music distributor. I don't even know if they're open anymore. I mean, I'm sure there are, but, you used to have to make friends with those guys and get your music into their system so they could sell your music. And then you're dealing with so much bullshit in between the time that you actually say, okay, I want my music distributed, to the point where it actually starts being sold. I mean, if you look at a record label contract, it's like a mile long, and it's filled with bullshit. I mean, it's filled with so much garbage that doesn't even really exist these days, like breakage. Like, record labels used to charge 20% fee for breakage. And that means that for every time that a box of whatever, whether it's CDs, tapes, or vinyl, which the vinyl is what started the whole breakage clause. But regardless, and like the funny thing was with the vinyls used to break. So that's where breakage comes from. Vinyl used to break. So when you would put a box of vinyls, you say there's 1,000 vinyls in a box, you would put it on a truck and you'd send it across the country. When that truck got there, the record labels made a claim, which is complete crap, but the record labels made the claim that 1 out of 5 vinyls would break, which is 20%. So they would automatically deduct 20% from your, royalty fees, any kind of monies that were coming to you. They would deduct the breakage fees, right? So that was vinyl. So now we got into tapes and CDs. Now, I don't know if you guys are, I'm 36. I had tapes. Some of my, contemporaries will be able to, agree with me. But if you ever try to break a tape, good luck. Like, you needed tools. Like, you needed hammers, and, you needed vice grips. Like, you couldn't really just take a tape and break it in half. Same with CDs. You couldn't take a CD and just snap it in half. And if you did, like, you watch out for shards flying in your face. So, if you run it over the car, yes. If you, put it in a fire, sure. But just traveling on a truck in a box, sitting inside of a jewel case, which is protecting the CD, or even the tape, which had a hard plastic case, there was no breakage. And they continuously charged it, right? And now that we get into the digital side of things, the breakage turned into digital breakage. Huh? What is a digital breakage? MP3s don't break. You don't have to pay to duplicate MP3s. But this is what record label contracts have. So you start to subtract all these things and subtract them from your bottom line, and you start to notice that, damn, like, I'm looking at my royalty statements, or I'm looking at my, checks coming in, and it's like, it used to be you would get, a certain amount, the record label would get a certain amount, the distributor would keep a certain amount. And then if you were dealing with, you have singers and a whole band, so you have to separate that, and you have to take the producer cost, the lawyer, the business manager. Everybody has to get paid. Before you know it, everybody got paid more than you. Or you as band members notice that the lawyer's making more money because there's 5 of you, one of them. The band takes an X amount and divides it 5 ways. The lawyer takes their percentage. So it always ends up being that the lawyer sometimes gets a little bit more, or the manager gets more than, or damn near close to what the band members are making. And it's like, it's insane. And these are the record contracts that people are so eager to sign because they think that the record contract is like an end goal where it gives them the ability to become a record label signee, and that somehow is success, right? To them, it means that I'm successful now. I made it. To me, it means the beginning of a whole lot of work and not necessarily any sort of success because, yeah, sure, you worked hard, busted your ass, you got a record deal. Great. Now that means you have to go to the studio. You're not done with the studio. You have to go to the studio. More times than not, they'll make you re-record the entire album. If you've recorded your whole album at home, even if your equipment's good, even if it sounds pretty good, not to say 100% of the times, but a good amount of time, a record label would want you to go and get it professionally mixed, but by a real engineer, get it mastered, get it done with, better digital audio workstations than you have, get it recorded on better microphones, even better freaking cables, So this is the stuff that the record label will end up forcing you to do, make you recoup the cost of the recording contract and just drain you. So oftentimes what you'll see will happen is the artist that ends up getting into a record deal will end up owing the record label money on the first project, right? So after the record label invested in the artist, gave him an advance, gave him a recording advance and maybe a living stipend, gave him whether it's money for promotional or marketing, any money that the record label gives you is recoupable. So they're not just going to give you an advance, and advance is just like, oh, your paycheck. An advance is really what it is. It's advanced monies for you to utilize to finish the project, whether or not it's, they're recording the project or re-recording or whatever it is. They're giving you this money specifically for your work at the label. It's not to go buy jewelry. It's not to go buy cars. And that's what most artists do. And I don't say most. I don't want to offend everybody, but a lot of artists take their recording advances and they blow them on bullshit. And if you don't have any kind of track record or history of success in the music industry, I could guarantee you that they're going to want that money back before the record's even out. I mean, it's just, that's the kind. And, I'm being facetious. They're not really going to want it before the record's out, but they're going to want this money back as soon as they could possibly get it. And they're going to want to make sure that, not only are you using this to further the project and to get it ready for release and distribution, and if they notice that you're not doing it or you're not completing your tasks on deadline, on time, delivering, the project as promised, as agreed upon, they'll shelf you. And sometimes they'll do it on purpose. Sometimes they'll just put you on a shelf, make you sit out, this whole release, whether or not it's, slated for release or not already, but they won't release your record. And then because you more than likely will sign a multi-project deal with a label, because a label doesn't want to just do one project with you, because God forbid the project blows up and then you're a free agent after that point. And some other label is going to recoup all the hard work that the prior label did to kind of develop you and release your record. So they're going to want a few projects out of you, right? So now you're going to be stuck, literally stuck in a record contract, meaning that you cannot release another record because you have no way of making the record. You can't pay the producer. You can't pay session musicians. You can't rent studio time. Shit, you can't even pay for food and, things of that nature to keep you going. So you're stuck in a record deal, which means that you can no longer release any records anywhere as long as this primary label has control over your, basically your existence. So now you're stuck in a record label deal that is not doing anything for you, has cost you money, and now is preventing you from being a musician. And so I kind of want everybody to understand that, of course, I'm not being black and white here. I'm not saying that, yes, you should join a label or sign to a label, or no, you should not sign to a label. And I'm not saying that the labels are evil and they're going to screw you. All I'm saying is that as a musician, you have to make the decision of whether or not record label is right for you. More times than not, it's probably not going to be. A lot of us as musicians do not have universal appeal. We're not Justin Timberlake. We're not Rihanna's. We're not Jay-Z's. We may have successful careers, but those successful careers may have a limit. And I'm not saying this to be a hater. I'm not saying this to be, to make you feel negatively about yourself or scare you in any way. But I'm just giving you a taste of reality. You got to realize that you're not going to be a superstar, and most of us will not be. And the numbers of people who actually reach that level of stardom is like thousands of a percent, if not millions. I mean, you have so many people that are trying to be successful musicians. A lot of people are working harder than you. A lot of people are working harder than me, and they're not getting successful. So it's a real toss-up, and I always say that luck should never be part of your marketing or part of your business strategy. You shouldn't rely on luck to kind of work out in your favor, even though if you're positive and good things always happen to you, great. Still, you need to be realistic about how these things work. So, personally, I would say that before you go rushing into signing any contracts, I don't care who it's with, you always want to make sure that, you have your manager and you have your lawyer, review this stuff. So, that kind of brings me into my next point of when is it a right time to have a manager? And it's funny because I just dealt with this not too long ago. Somebody was looking for a manager, and maybe I misconstrued it. Maybe the guy was ready. Maybe he was absolutely ready for management. He had all his ducks in a row. He made sure he took care of everything he needed to. He had everything ready. He was building up a following. He was recording music. I don't know. I don't know who this person was. Somebody just asked if anybody knew any managers. My initial response was, why do you need a manager? And the answer was, well, I need somebody to blah, blah, blah. I need somebody to find business, distribute, all this extra stuff. And it's like, okay, cool. First question always was, what has he done already? And that's usually the kind of a red flag for me. So if I even have to ask, what has your artist done to warrant the need for a manager? Chances are, now granted, I don't know every artist, and I don't want to sound like, I would know everybody and I know who's ready, who's not. But if the artist doesn't display a huge amount of success already, and then it doesn't have to be stardom, like it could just be local success. It could be, you're just getting paid off of music and that's your main thing. If you don't have that, no self-respecting manager will represent you. Because again, a record label profits off of you because you generate income. Music managers do the same exact thing. They don't want to sit here and babysit. They don't want to develop you as an artist. They don't want to take somebody who's a nobody and make them into somebody unless that person is super talented and just hasn't been reached by anybody yet. So if, you're the super music manager and you discover new talent and this guy or this girl is just amazing and they don't have any representation and they haven't really done much, but you caught them at some open mic or you figured out some way, you found them on YouTube, you will reach out to that artist and you say, hey, listen, like you're, I don't know where you are in your music career and blah, 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 but, I think you're great and I'd like to represent you and manage you. And that happens. And it happened to Justin Bieber. It happened to just a lot of different people in the music industry. So it does happen. But on the flip side of that coin, when you have to go and you have to hit up managers, and those managers have no idea who you are, granted, you might be asking a wrong type of manager. Now, most managers just they cross genre, so they'll have everybody. They'll have a country singer and a rapper, so it doesn't really matter to them. Especially like talent agencies, they don't give a shit what kind of artist you do. They have, it's all the same world, So whether you're country or rap, it's probably going to be a big overlap of people that you need to know, and those guys probably know everybody anyhow. So it doesn't necessarily really matter if it's a country singer manager or if it's a rapper manager. He's probably going to be able to handle both, but if he doesn't know who you are and you're basically kind of in the same world as them, which is the music industry, and they have no idea who you are, they're going to basically either hang up on you or just get you off the phone or they're going to give you a reason why they can't represent you. And that reason is going to be, I don't know who you are. And I don't know what you've done. And what have you done? And at that point, the manager loses interest. If you have to convince the manager that you're great, but he hasn't already seen that in you, it's not going to happen. You're going to waste your time. And when it comes to management that you can obtain, whether it's easily, whether it's, by luck, and you feel like, wow, this guy's really going to manage me, huh? That's usually somebody's cousin. And I always laugh about that. And, I've known people and I've heard stories about people who fronted and pretended to be somebody they're not just to go out and get laid or, stunt in the club with fake jewelry and try to look like they're somebody. These are the people that want to be managers, right? These are the people that manage local artists, and these are the people that manage, nobodies. And no offense, and I'm just saying nobody as far as like in the world of music, there's somebodies and there's nobodies, and you're a nobody when you're starting out. I was a nobody. I'm probably still a nobody. Who cares? But the thing is that a manager has to see success in you, and prior success, prior accomplishments that you've already achieved without having to go and dig, without having to have you prove to them and, debate for half an hour why you're worthy of their attention. And so a manager is going to basically look at your catalog, look at your social media. They're going to look at your, touring history, whether or not you've done shows with major artists or open for major artists, whether or not you have connections at the local radio stations, whether or not that, you've obviously made strides and gains in the music industry. And if they have to really dig deep to find these things, I guarantee you they're going to be not interested. And the people that will be interested will be the people that will fuck your career up. These will be the people that, will use your name. If you're like a hot up-and-coming artist in an area and people start to kind of get to know you, there's going to be all sorts of these snake-ass managers that are going to want to jump all over you and use your name and, be in the club. Oh, I'm such and such manager. But, whether it's getting in the club or getting laid, throwing your name out there is the way they would want to do it. And what is that going to do for you? It's going to basically leave your name just dragged through all sorts of mud. And, you're going to be embroiled in all sorts of bullshit because these guys are unprofessional. And for the same reason that they are who they are, they will ruin your career along the way. And so while you're trying to work your ass off and you're putting your trust in them and they're out there supposedly grinding it out, which supposedly warrants, 10 to 12% a rate that you would pay to a manager. Now, if a manager is successful, you're going up to 15, maybe even 20. So when you do make it, the managers that are doing $1 million deals, they're going to want a fat chunk of that because, hey, I made that happen for you. Without it, you wouldn't have been here. And then at the same time, it's worth it because, hey, that guy just gave me $1 million deal. Granted, he took, 20%. That's still a lot of money. Now, what are you going to give somebody, that brings you nothing? What's 20% of nothing? What's 15% of nothing? What's 1% of nothing? Nothing. So, a lot of people just want to manage it so they don't have to work. A lot of people want to manage it so they don't have to do the stuff themselves. They want to sit in the studio and make beats and rap. Cool. But while you're doing that, the manager is basically doing your work for you, meaning that your interest is not really in his mind like his own interest is. So he's not going to necessarily deliver like you would if you were doing your own work. And I personally think that by the time that you get to the point where you're actually needing a manager, all of that time before it, you don't need a manager simply because you don't have the jobs and you don't have the gigs or whatever it is. You don't have the revenue coming in to warrant a manager. Somebody's not going to want to deal with you if you don't, if you only make even a couple $100 a month off selling beats. What kind of manager is going to want 50% of that? Like 15% of $600 is not really much. What is that, like $50? I don't know. Like, it's nothing. And nobody's going to want to do work for that. Nobody's going to, and it takes a lot to do a manager's job. So let's give it up to the managers out there who really do it and who really make, opportunities happen for a lot of musicians, producers. Those guys, I know a couple guys around here. I'm from Connecticut. Chris Fury out here, he manages Anoid, he manages Chris Webby. I mean, the dude, he's been grinding for I don't even know how many years. That dude is fantastic. I should get him on this podcast. Um, there's guys out there that really do hustle and make money. Everybody else is bullshitting. So be careful who you hire to be your manager, because a lot of times you're going to find that people are going to fuck your career up before they actually help you. And that's going to be a problem for you, because once a manager ruins your reputation, it's like you ruined your own reputation. You're not going to sit there and blame your manager for it, because ultimately you hired him, so it's on you. So just be careful who you hire as a manager. Make sure you do your research on them. Make sure that you actually do the whole reference check. If they won't provide references, that should be a red flag. Make sure that you get people's phone numbers that they've worked with, so you could reach out to them and have a conversation with them. It's the same thing as getting a resume from a potential employee. You want to make sure that this guy actually did what he said he did. Anybody could bullshit and tell you what their accomplishments are, but when it's time to prove that their accomplishments are real, this is when you'll know. And so if somebody, if you ask somebody for a list of references who's trying to be your manager, and the answer is just like, trust me, don't trust them. And this goes for lawyers too. And for lawyers, it's even worse, because lawyers tend to be smart, and they tend to be smarter than the rest of us because they've put the time and the effort into being smart. And so they make their money off using their brains. And so it's really, really important that you don't just quickly hire a manager on the first go around, the first guy you talk to. Oh, sounds great. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hire him. Be easy, because this is the thing that's really going to, build a foundation or crumble it if you don't do the right things and you don't hire the right people. I mean, a lawyer who's representing you, who's going to take your CD possibly to record labels, or who's going to use his connections to further your career, if he's unethical and he does shady shit, which a lot of lawyers do, you're going to find that this guy is going to basically ruin your reputation before you have a chance to even go out there and do it yourself. And I always say that, maybe I'm just not really trusting of people, but I always feel like a lot of the stuff that we pawn off on managers and lawyers as musicians and artists, we could do ourselves. There's Google. If you have questions about something, you could reach out. And I mean, it's sometimes better to read all the contracts yourselves and then just pay somebody per hour to explain things to you. You know what I mean? Until you find that one lawyer that feels right, looks good, he's good on paper, he's good off paper, he's just the right fit, So until that happens, taking any and every which lawyer is definitely not advised. You also got to remember, a lot of lawyers that do business and have been doing business in the music industry know a lot of people. So what happens is a lot of backroom deals and little side deals get done that you may not even know about. And it all really comes down to how ethical the lawyer is. If a lawyer is very ethical, has great reviews, great references, great. But he's also going to be a little bit more out of your reach, because obviously the cream rises to the top, and everything at the bottom is going to be kind of readily available for everyone, which makes it very, not so valuable, I guess. Just like that in music business, it's the same thing. You're going to have managers and lawyers that are going to be unattainable to you because they just won't work with you, because it's not really worth it, time-wise, and you can't afford them, and you're not generating the revenue, period. It's just like, they don't really care, So it's very important that you understand that a lawyer is going to be somebody who's going to at least pretend to have your best interest in mind. I mean, that's kind of what you're paying them to do. But a lot of times, you really have to do your research and your homework on the people that you hire. Because if you do not, the problem is that you're going to find that your protections, your rights, and just your interest is going to be squandered. And people are going to, they're going to walk all over you if your manager doesn't have your best interest in mind because he's a rookie or he's not qualified, or your lawyer, he's not going to necessarily protect you, maybe because he's a rookie, he's not qualified, or maybe he's not even an entertainment lawyer pretending to be one. It's these things that you really have to take into consideration. A lot of times people just sidestep them because it's easier, it's cheaper, good lawyers cost money, good managers demand, success. Um, you're going to find it that there's going to be all these people in between that are going to be just ready to take you as a client, try to squeeze water out of a rock, try to get every last penny from you, and leave you kind of high and dry and disappoint you and ruin your potential chances. And, I've been in the music industry a long time. I've been in the content industry almost, going on a year and a half now. And from what I'm seeing is you don't get a whole lot of chances. People don't want to deal with somebody who's not going to be reliable. People don't want to, unless you're already a successful celebrity, then you could get second, third, fourth, ninth chance. But as a rookie getting into the game, you don't get more than one usually, and people just don't have the time. They don't have the time to keep trying you and giving you all these opportunities when you can't even, keep your shit together. So you want to make sure that the people that you do business with, your team members, whether it's a manager, whether it's a business manager, whether it's a touring manager, if you're at that level, if you're an artist and you have producers, even band members, if you have band members that are not really well, put together, they're not cohesive enough as a team, they're not working well together. These are the things that are going to derail any project, derail any process that you got going on. And it's all really because people don't take the time and don't do the necessary research to figure out who and what these people are, why they are, how they are, and, what they cost, and, all the fine points. And that is what kills most careers. A lot of people complain and bitch, oh, I got screwed. Even the Lox, Jadakiss, Styles P, and Sheik, when they signed with P. Diddy back in the day, and Diddy was a shark. I mean, Diddy's been a shark since, he went out on his own. And I'm sure the deal points that he gave them could have been negotiated, could have been worked out if they had a lawyer. Granted, the leverage sometimes doesn't, work in your favor. You can't negotiate things because labels are just going to be like, next. But if you're wanted by the label, if they're making, if there's a bidding war going on, if a couple labels want you and, they start to heat things up and, there's room for negotiation. There's room for deal points to be shifted in either which direction. So they could work in your favor, they could work in the label's favor. But that stuff could get worked out. Now, for somebody like the Lox, because they were young at the time, and back in the 90s, when rappers used to get deals and they were either underground or they were just getting kind of hot, these rappers would feel like, man, I got to jump on this because I don't have another option. I got to pay rent like everybody else. I got to put food on the table. So they would take these bum-ass deals. Nowadays, they're known as 360 deals. And they would take these bum-ass deals, and then what happened was, and it became kind of, for anybody who's a hip-hop head and anybody who knows the story, became kind of like a very tense situation between the Lox and Diddy where, there was like accusations and all sorts of shit being thrown back and forth, and people were mad, and, and I think Diddy was in the right. Diddy offered him a deal, never said that the deal was supposed to be sterling and make, the Lox be like the primary, the primary beneficiaries of like all the good that the deal was. I mean, obviously Diddy wrote this deal to benefit Bad Boy, but the Lox could have negotiated, but they didn't, and they ended up signing that deal. And I might be wrong about the negotiation part, but I'm pretty sure they didn't. I'm pretty sure no lawyers ever reviewed it. From what I remember, it was a big mess. The Lox ended up getting shafted. They ended up leaving Bad Boy all pissy and ended up becoming like a big sore thing where Diddy ended up eventually giving up, giving them all their copyrights and everything else. But that's because they already made it as D-Block. And I think Diddy just kind of felt pressure, and it just ended up being silly. Like it almost ended up being like unbusinesslike, where a deal was made, people got, shafted because of the decisions they made, and it ended up becoming a thing where now it's like, well, now Diddy has to give up his possession because morally he was in the wrong. I mean, it is what it is, and I kind of am happy that the Lox got it the way they got it, and I'm glad that Jadakiss and them fellas ended up getting the stuff back, and that's awesome. But from a standpoint of business, I think that was kind of bullshit because, hey, man, you signed the contract. Like, you get the contract, you could read it, you could say no, you could say, I don't like this, I want to have my lawyer review it, and I'm not signing this until he does. And if you ever get the pressure to sign a contract or it's coming off the table because you didn't sign it, then you don't want to sign it in the first place. If any contract gets presented to you and you feel pressure where you can't take the contract with you or at least have a lawyer come back with you and review it, dude, you don't want to be in that contract because usually that contract follows up with other things that maybe aren't even on paper that end up being complete bullshit where you're like, oh my God, why did I sign this contract? So, in wrapping this up, I kind of want you guys to understand something that the information for all these things that you do in the music industry is out there. It's everywhere. The problem is there's so much of it, you may not have any idea of what's good and what's bad. And I feel for people who don't have the funds to go get lawyers, but you know what? This is a big boy sport. This is NFL. You know what I mean? You can't get into the NFL being scrawny unless you're a kicker. And even at that point, you still have to know how to protect yourself. And so if you can't be in this industry, don't complain that you can't be in this industry because of the way that it's built. Figure out a way in. And if you can't necessarily, afford a good lawyer, maybe you have to learn how to read contracts. Maybe you have to spend additional time reading the contracts, Googling the words you don't understand, maybe reaching out to people, getting some pro bono work. Hopefully you won't have to. Hopefully that you'll be able to afford a lawyer. But just like anything else, man, you want it bad enough, you got to work for it and you got to get it. And as a manager, for anybody who's out there looking for a manager, please understand that you don't want one. Do it yourself. Go out there, learn the business. Go out there, learn the industry, learn the marketing, learn the promotions, learn how to record and mix and master your own music. Obviously know how to play your instrument, but then know the business side of it too, because even though you may be able finally to hire these people, if you don't understand the language that they speak, especially when asking you to sign contracts or paperwork or this or that, if you don't understand what it is that they want from you, dude, you're just like, you're a duck, you're a mark. You're going to get handled like anybody on, you know what I mean? Like anybody in any business industry that doesn't know what they're talking about, they're going to get run over. And it's going to be on you. You can't blame anybody because you didn't do your research. That's on you. Nobody's inclined to help you. I'm sure you're going to get help along the way, and that's great. And salute to people who actually care and help rookies and people getting into the industry. But for the most part, more people are going to shit on you. More people are going to try to take advantage of you and then get over on you and use you to further their own interest. And, managers, lawyers, record labels, all that stuff is pretty much all in the same box for me. They're all going to look to utilize you. They're all going to want money from you, whether it's directly or on the back end. And they're all going to basically care about themselves before you. So if you don't care about you, then this is not the industry you want to be in, because this is an industry of disappointment and failure. And for people that don't understand that how much failure is this industry involves and what kind of rate of success this industry has, you're in a wrong industry if this is not the game you want to play. And more times than not, more people getting into the music industry end up leaving within 1 to 2 years. And I'm talking about, I don't care how long you've been making music for. Once you start to actually make that your income, the fail rate is astronomical and the success rate is minuscule. So be smart, take your time, don't rush, don't make brash decisions, don't make decisions out of desperation ever, and don't make decisions when you're really emotional. Because, somebody could tell you, oh, you're going to get signed to a record label. Those words alone, that sentence alone could make somebody just, oh my God, I'm going to get signed to a record label. You're signing a contract. It's like getting a phone deal with a shitty phone provider that wants you to stay with them for 2 years anyway, pay them full rate, but that you never get service in your house. Same thing, when you sign a bad record deal, you're going to get stuck with these people for God knows how many years or how many projects. And if you can't get anything out of them, or if they don't support you, or if they don't, back you and they don't give you any kind of, whether creative assistance or otherwise, you're basically just you're paying them like it's like leasing a car. You're gonna do all the work, you're gonna pay, and then you're gonna hand the stuff back over to them, and they're gonna win, and you're gonna be stuck in the same contract. So, guys, I'm gonna wrap this up. Again, for anybody who is looking for any kind of help with marketing, advertising, promotion, please hit me up. We do a lot of marketing with Facebook advertising. For the past few months, I've been doing consultations with people who are looking to learn Facebook ads. I think it's super important because Facebook and Instagram, it's the same platform, so you could cross-market. If you're interested in learning Facebook or Instagram advertising, please hit me up. You could find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at EQ Productions. That's ECUE PRODUCTIONS. That's EQ Productions on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You could also hit me up on my website. That's www.eqproductions.com. That's ECUEPRODUCTIONS.com. Please let me know if you have any questions about any of the content that I've talked about today. If you want to review anything, again, I do consultations with people who are really serious about their music and they want to get somewhere in their music career. Again, this is Brennan Lunan at EQ Productions. Thank you for tuning in. This is episode 10 of the Music Marketing Podcast, and we'll talk to you guys next week.